Hi synth lovers. Welcome back to my channel. This video is part of a series of videos in which I am designing and building my own DIY modular synth from scratch. Let's say you want to take an output signal from one of your Euro rack modules and you want to use it as an input for more than one module. What would you do? There are a couple of options available for you. One option would be to use a splitter cable. This has a plug on one side and splits up into two cables with jacks on the end. You could also use stackable cables. These cables are equipped with plugs with built-in jacks. This way you can split or daisy chain your signal, ending up with multiple copies. Another alternative is to use a small, free-floating gadget with multiple jacks wired together. And finally, you could use a dedicated module that takes a signal as an input and distributes it over a couple of outputs. This is called a multiple, or mult, and we will look at those in this video. Why would you opt for a dedicated module instead of using one of the other options? Of course, everybody has his or her own opinion, but for me, it contributes to making a patch a little bit less cluttered. As you might have guessed, a multiple is a fairly simple device. It consists of a couple of jacks that are wired together. Basically, one would not even need a PCB for that. Here are my requirements for my multiples. 2 inputs, 3 outputs for each input. And, when input 2 is not used, the signal on input 1 must be available on the outputs from input 2. This can be established with this schematic. If J1 is plugged in, and J5 is not plugged in, the signal will reach all 6 outputs. When we plug in J5, the connection between J1 and J6, 7 and 8 will be broken and now the signal from J5 will be available on these jacks. If only J5 is plugged in, the signal will only be available on outputs J6 to J8. In the schematic, no active components were used. That is why we call this a passive multiple, and it surely has some disadvantages. We strive to have high impedance inputs for the inputs of our modules. However, theoretically we could use several multiples in series, splitting the signal in an unlimited number. Driving all these inputs from one output might be a bit too much. That is why it might be better to buffer our outputs in some cases. So, let's add that to my requirements. With that added requirement, the schematic becomes something like this. The input is buffered by 1 op-amp. Each output gets its own buffer as well. This is an active, or buffered multiple. It can be used in combination with passive multiples, and it will help to not overload the output of your modules. The final schematic for my version of the multiple looks like this. As you can see, I split it up in 2 boards, one for input-output, and one for buffering. The I/O board can actually be used to create a passive multiple by bridging the PCB connectors that are used to pass the signals between the 2 PCBs. This means that for a passive multiple, only one PCB is needed. The PCBs look like this. I used surface mount types for the op-amps, to keep the module slim. It is a 3HP module and that was the smallest I could go with the 3.5 connectors I am using. With another type of connector and board layout, I can probably go narrower. And, of course, I designed a front panel as well. I used both sides, so that one side can be used for the passive multiple and the other side for the active one. That concludes it for this episode. In the next one, I will tackle the power bus. This is not really a module, but it is quite essential for our synth. I will show the simple design, PCB design, and the build of this item. All documentation that I have created for this series is available on my Patreon. This includes schematics and the Gerber files for the PCB designs and front panel designs. Thanks for watching. If you like this kind of content, consider subscribing and hit that like icon. Leave a comment if you have questions or suggestions. Or just to say hello. Have a nice day and see you in another episode.